Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, welcome to With Jewish Youth. And how do you feel today? After you had an opportunity to hear Gershon Jacobson last Thursday night and had an over Shabbos to read the Allgemeine and to digest what Gershon had to say, I'm sure you're ready for him now, huh? Waiting to hear what else has he got to tell us that is so fascinating from a newspaperman in general and from a Gershon Jacobson in particular. Well, we got him back with us tonight in the studio, and we have some very, very interesting things to talk about. And so, let me say to you, it's a delight for us to bring these programs to you, and we are, of course, so very grateful to Joel Plavin of WEVD and the radio station itself for the wonderful cooperation that we've been getting, and we're happy to report to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this program has received some fantastic feedback. The studio has been really, really beaming with the success of this show. It's something, of course, when we started out, we didn't know what it would be like, but thank God for the quality of the people who come onto this program, for the news that we bring to them and the interesting stories that we could relate to them from behind the scenes and behind the curtains, or perhaps the things that have made this an outstanding program, an outstanding show, and a household event in every Jewish home. So, Gershon Jacobson, thanks to you for your wonderful contributions that you've been making to our show With Jewish Youth, and it's certainly wonderful to have you back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get right into the fireworks today, because I think that we've been waiting for this for a long time. He's such an interesting fellow, this Gershon Jacobson. I must say it in his presence that once we start talking, we go off on a tangent and we forget the outline which we started out with. So today we're going to go right to the core of a very interesting incident that took place in his life. You know, Gershon Jacobson was the first Jewish correspondent in the world ever to visit Egypt. It was after the Six-Day War, and Gershon made his way to Egypt. Now, this wasn't a very easy task, and it was rather a little dangerous, I would say. But Gershon was there, covering the story from the Jewish standpoint. And I think it'll be very interesting for us to listen to Gershon tell us how all this came about and some of the experiences that he went through while he was in Egypt. How was he able to get along over there? How did they treat him? And so on. I think this will throw a lot of light on what's happening around us today.
Well, Rabbi Hecht, thank you very much for inviting me again for the third time to your wonderful program with Jewish youth. You want to know about Egypt? Right after the Six-Day War, I decided that while everybody is going to see the Suez Canal from the Israeli side, I'll try to do something different, and I'll try to see the Israelis from the Egyptian side. So the Egyptians, of course, broke their diplomatic relations with the United States. There was no Egyptian consulate in New York. So they had a mission in Washington, which was attached to the Indian embassy. And I cabled them saying, my name is Gershon Jacobson, I'm a newspaperman working for an Israeli newspaper, Yediot Acharonot. And at that time I was the UN correspondent of the Day Morning Journal and city editor. And I said I would like to go for about 3 to 4 weeks to Egypt. They did not respond immediately, which was I expected they will not respond. And people told me in general that I'm crazy with the whole idea of going to Egypt after such a devastating situation that they were in with the Six-Day War. Their armies were all collapsed, their air force in pieces and so on. In any event, I then called up the Egyptian ambassador to the United Nations, who is a soft-speaking attorney from Cairo. I called him up and I told him my name is Gershon Jacobson. I would like to take about 10 minutes of his time and see him. And his secretary tried to tell me that he's in conference, and I said it's very urgent, very important. It has to do with my professional work, and I would like very much to be able to see him today or the next day. In any event, this worked, and I had an appointment with the man. I came over to him, and I told him again who I am. He knew me, he saw me, and since I have a beard, my face is not that easy to forget. And he said to me, you're Jewish, aren't you? I said, yes, but the way I understand it, Egypt has no laws forbidding Jews to come in. So he says to me, are you a Zionist? And I said, depends what you call a Zionist. If you mean a card-carrying Zionist, I am not. But every Jew who believes that the land of Israel was given to the Jews by the Almighty is a Zionist. And I am a religious Jew. I pray and I believe that this piece of land, which God had given to Abraham, it's interesting because the background will give you an insight how I got there. Belongs to us. We were never left of our own goodwill. We were driven out. In any event, I told him, professionally, I think Egypt should not hesitate and give me a visa and allow me to see the situation from the Egyptian side. So he told me like that. He says, look, take an application. I'll give you an application to fill out. Send it to Cairo, to the attention of the following man. He gave me his name. And I'll do the rest. If you don't hear from us within a month, try the same procedure again. Within a month, I said, I want to go next week, 2 weeks from now. I have no patience. To make a very long story short, a month passed, 2 months passed, I didn't hear from them. I cabled them. And I met other Egyptian diplomats, and I kept on insisting, and they were saying to me, what will you do in Egypt? And I said, I'll just go sightseeing, I'll go to the synagogue, I'll go to the Jewish cemetery, I'll travel, I'll look at the country, I want to see how the Russians are helping Egypt to build up their military machine, and I will write whatever I'll see. They tried to dissuade me from going. On the other hand, I said, what are you afraid? If I'll be writing in my newspapers here and in Israel saying that you're afraid for a newspaper man to come into the country to see it, that would really mean that you are trying to hide something. In any event, apparently it worked, and then I got a postcard saying I should send in my American passport, an American citizen. They knew who I am, and on the passport they stamped a 3-month visa to me, and then the Israelis came into the picture. The Israelis decided, and I can say who it was the head of intelligence of the Israeli embassy in Washington, who was a good friend of mine. His name was General Geva, Yosef Geva. He told me it's a trick. They'll arrest me, and then they'll pressure to exchange me for some top Egyptian who is in Israel. And he felt that I wouldn't be able to help it. They'll just create some kind of a provocation. Let's assume they'll put in one of my bags some opium or some narcotics or some other things which is illegal to bring into the country, and they'll arrest me, and it will be my word against theirs. And then, of course, they'll continue. Or they make a short trial saying I'm a spy or something. So I decided, go I will, but I'll try to quieten it down, and I'll wait for a month or so. And the Israelis were very careful. They went to my newspaper in Israel, which was covering part of my expenses. This is a very expensive trip. And asked the paper to not to allow me to go. And I got a cable from the managing editor, Mr. Yitkowski, who said to me, Gershon, we need a correspondent in New York. We don't need one in the Egyptian jail. Still, I felt I had to go there because to write about the Israeli-Arab conflict, you cannot do it just by going to Israel. I felt I had to be there to speak to Egyptian officials. I had even an ambition to see President Nasser, who was still alive at that time, and of course to see the Jews and so forth. A month passed by. I still had the visa in my pocket, and I bought a ticket. A lot of my friends tried to persuade me not to go. I took a plane from New York to Paris, from Paris to Geneva, from Geneva I took a Swiss Air to Cairo. I arrived. They did not expect me at the time of my arrival. I saw it immediately, the way they looked through, and they wanted to know who I am, what I am. I had some religious Jewish articles that I took with me along. I was asked by several top rabbis in New York to give a pair of tefillin to some people. Some others wanted some books in French and in English about Judaism. They did not pay any attention to that bag where I had this material. And I took a cab and I went to the Cairo Hilton where I had reservations, and I spent 23 days, to be precise, in Egypt. It was a fascinating trip, and even more fascinating, the articles, the stories that I had published after my being there. Just to tell you, which would interest some of your readers, is the following episode. When you go on a flight, I always demand kosher food. And on my way back from Egypt to Israel, I was going Cairo to Nicosia, which is Cyprus, and from there to Israel. I asked them on the phone, when I made my reservations to go back, I said, is there food being served? They said, yes, there is a lunch being served. And I said, I insist on kosher food. It was the Egyptian Airlines, the National Egyptian Airlines, and they said they don't provide kosher food. They don't have it. I said, then I don't know what to do, because when I bought my ticket in New York, I said I want all along, all the way, kosher food. And they said they don't have it. And I was very insistent, and the vice president of the company in charge of merchandising and customer relations called me back and he said, Mr. Jacobson, please, we have no kosher food. We'll give you anything you want. We'll give you cheese, we'll give you vegetables. I said, no, I want the same food as everybody else, whether it's meat or anything else, and I want kosher. Otherwise, I won't take the plane. Why I did it, I don't know, but they were very nasty to me in the last 2 weeks because they realized that I see too many people that they don't want me to see. So they decided they were nasty to me, so I said I'll be nasty to them. And I was nasty on a point where I felt my rights were there. The end of the story was that the Egyptian airline demanded from the Cyprus Airlines to provide a kosher luncheon for Mr. Jacobson. And when it was opened in the Egyptian plane, it had the seal from the Israeli chief rabbinate. Because Cyprus bought the luncheon, the plate, from Israel, which is the closest kosher providing place, and I had a kosher lunch. And as a matter of fact, I keep it at my home, the cover, the top cover, which is of the Egyptian Airlines, and the inside with the silver paper, where it has the seal of the Israeli rabbinate, and which I had on the Egyptian airline. So I am keeping it as a memento, as a souvenir, a reminder of this trip. But it was a very interesting trip. I saw very many people. I didn't get to see Nasser. I saw the foreign minister. I saw the minister of education. I saw Heikel. I saw the Jews, of course, the chief rabbi. I spent the Shabbos in the home of the only Moel who had 11 children. His name was Menashe. I went to the what they call the Moses synagogue and the Rambam synagogue where the Rambam once lived. I traveled. I spent the whole trip with Russians on the bus in the desert. I went all over the country. If you ask me how I did it, very simple. For the first 3-4 days, I didn't go out from the hotel. I just called every embassy under the sun from the telephone book in Cairo, and I made appointments with the ambassador of Switzerland and of New Zealand and Canada, military attachés. Now, you should remember, not the big countries, the small ones. There are 120 embassies in Cairo, and those guys have nothing to do, you see. They sit the whole day, they play cards, they go to the swimming pool. Suddenly they get a call from a Gershon Jacobson from New York, a correspondent who says to them, I want to take you to lunch, I want to talk to you. They came to the hotel to pick me up. Now the Egyptian Secret Service simply didn't know what to do. They said always there's a big top diplomat coming with a car, picking me up, taking me somewhere. And I set up the Yugoslavian ambassador, came to see me. The fellow from Ethiopia, from all kinds of African countries, black countries, Asian countries. That gave me some kind of a diplomatic immunity from being untouched. And I found Jews among them. For instance, a Captain Roth from Ottawa, who was the naval attaché from Canada, who, to my great sorrow, he was a broken man, he was an alcoholic, because he spent in Egypt about 22 years. He was an older Jew, a very assimilated Canadian Jew. But when I came, he cried. He says to me, you look just like my grandfather you look. And he always drank. He had bottles and bottles, of kind of wines and so forth. And he said to me, I'm bored with life. He's a naval attaché. He has nothing to do. Canada is a big country. But and here he said, you saved my life. He was so happy. He went with me to the synagogue on Friday night. He went with me to the Jewish community. He went with me to the rabbi, to the communal head. He went even to with me. I demanded to go and see some Jewish prisoners in a thing. He drove me till there. that gave me some kind of a more secure base on my trips. And it was a fascinating trip, just fascinating.
I can just imagine how daring it was, but I'm glad you're here to tell the story, because that package could have had a little poison in it too, that little package that you have the cover from in your house. But I thank God the Rebbe was watching over you, and I'm glad you're here tonight to tell us all about it. But let's go a little bit further. I also know, Gershon, that you covered the ecumenical conference in the Vatican. Now, this should be very interesting to my audience to hear about. A fellow in your image, coming out as a correspondent of a newspaper. At that time, I think you were still working for the Day Journal, and covering this kind of a story. I dare say you must have had a most important role, first of all as a correspondent, and then, of course, as a Jew, witnessing this kind of a conference, which could have had earth-shocking and world-shocking effects on the rest of the relationships between Jews and the non-Jewish world, Catholic world to be exact. I would like very much if you would be good enough to tell us something about this story, how it all came about, and some of your experiences that you went through in the Vatican.
Yes, this was also a very interesting series. That was in the early 60s when Pope John decided to call the Ecumenical Council in Rome. And I must say it was a very unusual request that the Vatican later on, the press office of the Vatican, described as the most unusual thing, that a Jewish newspaperman would ask for credentials to cover a purely Catholic gathering. But I and my editors then, and the publisher of the day, Arthur Jacobs, felt that because it is unusual and since it will affect the Jewish communities all over the world, where the Catholic Church is playing a role, we should cover it and look specifically for the Jewish angle, and I spent 3 months in the Vatican covering it. Of course, the main story was, from an organizational standpoint, whether the Vatican will adopt a resolution absolving the Jews from the alleged murder or stoning of Jesus. And there were some interesting debates about it. Of course, the sessions of the Vatican were in St. Peter's Basilica, but besides that it was closed for the press. As a Jew, traditionally I'm not allowed to go in there. But I didn't have to go in there. There were daily briefings in the press center, which was nearby. And the questions that came up during the briefings with top cardinals, top bishops, were very important from the standpoint how we Jews should react to the Catholic Church. I then wrote a series of, I believe, 50 or 60 articles about it. Some pamphlets were published. And my contention, besides covering the news, was that it is terribly dangerous, both from a Jewish standpoint and also from the place of the Jew in the world that he lives in, to have any kind of a religious dialogue with the Catholic Church. Because it is not so as many theologians contend that there are mutual bonds, that there are mutual theological interests between Judaism and Catholicism. We should respect the Catholic religion, give them all the due respect, but not try to find any kind of a modus vivendi or a mutual avenue that these two religions are the same, because they are not. And you cannot debate it, you cannot discuss it, because the basic fundamental beliefs of Judaism are different. And the Catholic basic fundamental beliefs are also different. And there is no such thing as a dialogue there. It doesn't do any good. It doesn't bring anything good. Now, of course, there are Jewish people or Jewish leaders, I would say, who believe professionally they make a living from having these dialogues. But I realize that there is no such need, and we should be very careful about it. Careful primarily not so much for the learned Jew, but for the mass of Jews, and this is very important for your type of listeners, or the young men and young women in college campuses, who are constantly confronted with the problem of intermarriage, with the problem of meeting, going out, and binding themselves with someone from a different religion. And if they see that, let's say, a rabbi or a head of a Jewish organization conducts a dialogue with the head of a Catholic institution or a priest or a minister or a cardinal, they are not interested in the theological debate. They are not interested whether the fact that there is Passover by Jews and there is Passover by Catholics, that there must be some kind of a mutual thing. To them it becomes that there are two religions and you can marry two. And we know that intermarriage for Judaism, not only from a religious standpoint, but from a national standpoint, as a people, is one of the most devastating situations. And the most devastating, I would say. That's why it was so vital and so important that someone, whether it's me or someone else, would cover such a thing and realize ahead of time the problem that such a ecumenical council might create in among the wide masses of Jewish youth who are uninformed, who are unlearned, who don't know, and to whom Judaism is another religion. There is Buddhism, there is Catholicism, there is Protestantism, there is Judaism. But we come from the standpoint Judaism is not just a religion, not another religion. It's a way of life. It's not a religion that you go on a Saturday morning to shul or to a synagogue. It's a religion that from the day you are born to the day that you die, every minute, every second, everything you do, whether you go to college, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a rabbi, whether you're a businessman, there is some way how you lead your life as a Jew. And in the framework of the Ecumenical Council, this was important to be covered. And I think it had a tremendous effect where I brought out these things. So it was an unusual thing then, but I'll never forget it, I think.
Well, I can just imagine. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to see you in the background and to see what this looked like. We haven't got too much time, Gershon. I must touch on another very important subject. I knew that in 1971 you went to Russia. Now, I'm sure that that must have been also an equally stirring and fascinating trip. And as much as time will permit us, try to tell us a little bit about this journey that you did behind the Iron Curtain.
Well, you seem to concentrate on my journeys. My work, though, is not only journey work. I go on journeys because since I write about the major events confronting Jewish life here and outside the United States, Israel, Russia, I like to be on the scene because you cannot really write and tell the story, whether it's the struggle of Jews in Russia to remain Jewish, whether it's the relationship between Catholics and Jews, whether it's the relationship between the blacks and the whites, or the black and the Jewish community, whether it's the relationship between Israel and the Arabs, if you are not on the scene. You must speak to the Arabs in Egypt to be able to write about it. You must speak to the Russians and the Russian Jews in Russia to be able to understand them. And I always try to put myself in a situation where even if I have any assumptions about it, I should forget about my assumptions and start from the beginning and come to ask people the most silly and obvious questions, which sounds to them silly, but that leads me in to penetrate into the soul, to the philosophy, into the fabric that makes them tick, what we would call. And that's why I went to Russia. I went to Russia in a time when, if you recall, was the sensational hijacking, allegedly hijacking trial in Leningrad. Now, I speak Russian. I was born in Russia. And I have quite a background as far as Russian Jewish life goes. So I went there, and it was the story of a Jewish community which I always feel was the crown of Judaism the world over. I always contend that like in any human being, there is a head, there are legs, there are hands, there is other parts of the body. In the Jewish people, the crown of the Jewish people in the past 500 years was Russian Jewry. Not German Jewry, not Polish Jewry, not Romanian Jewry, not Hungarian Jewry. And please don't, the listeners who come from these parts of the world should not be offended. But you have to realize that that Russia was the country that produced any major movement in Jewish life, which secured Jewish spiritual and physical existence in the past century. What came from Russia? Hasidism was born there, and the whole epopee of the whole era of modern Jewish struggle that can be compared to the historical Jewish struggle came into being in Russia, especially in the 55 years since the revolution, and especially since the last several years when there was this tremendous reawakening of a generation that everybody here in the West decided it's a lost generation. And not only the reawakening came into being that so many young men and young women decided they want to lead a Jewish life in Israel, and they're trying to break through the Iron Curtain by going to Israel. But the most dramatic aspect of reawakening came within Soviet Jewry itself. Today, people don't know it, and I am glad I have the opportunity to bring it out right here. There are young men that come from Russia who are big Talmidei Chachomim, who are top scholars, but real top scholars. Where did they study? They didn't go to any major Jewish educational institutions in Russia, and they are not in existence there. They studied in basements, in cellars, private homes, in a situation where their fathers were arrested, mothers were working in factories. Now, to go and see them and meet them and talk to them was for me a tremendous uplift. And the month-long visit to Russia, I must say, I spent in many Jewish homes. I'll never forget the story of a young Jewish lady who was a medical doctor in Moscow, who got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive with a bus, with the subway, about 3 hours to outside of the city to buy a kilo, less than a pound and a half of kosher meat. Now, this was not an old lady of 84 from a little town that still believes in eating kosher. This was a young lady of 29 with 2 children, who every morning she used to tell the children that they cannot have salami because there is no kosher salami, and she would go 4 o'clock in the morning to a secret place to buy a kilogram of kosher meat. And this is the heroism of Russian Jewry, and this is what I saw in many other such aspects on my trip to Russia.
Gershon, I'm awfully sorry, but you're going to have another encore, I'm afraid. We'll have to get you back here again. Our time is up. But this again was number 3 in a most interesting and inspiring evening with you, and I want you to know that with Jewish Youth, we'll certainly be very happy to record your programs as historic and indeed very, very interesting. I should like to say to you, thanks for being with us and thanks for giving us of your important time. We shall keep reading the Algemeine, and we will keep abreast of all latest Jewish happenings all over the world, and I'm sure that many of our radio listeners will be watching for your newspaper on the stands every Thursday morning to try to buy it and read it and really get the inside story behind the scenes. To you, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for making these programs possible. Thank you for writing. Thank you for calling. And please remember, if you have any intentions of having your children go to Camp Amuna, one of the 3 camps, Tiny Tots, Intermediates, or college, or to the college boys camp, please get in touch with us immediately. Time is running short until tomorrow night at the same time. May God bless you all.